In this latest episode of the Irish History Boys, we take a detailed look at one of the most notorious outrages of the Northern Ireland Troubles, the Miami Showband Massacre of 1975. We recall the horror of the event itself and explore the long lasting implications for the unfolding conflict. As the Troubles rage on 50 years ago, we also recall the attitude of the Irish government to the conflict and the use of violence, with a significant speech in Helsinki from the Irish Taoiseach at the time, Liam Cosgrave.
Death in ambush. The whole community has recoiled in horror from the early morning carnage on the main Banbridge to Newry Road, in which three members of the Miami Showband, on their way home to Dublin after playing in Banbridge, were gunned to death in a UVF ambush, and two of their murderers blew themselves up while planting a bomb in the band's bus. This latest horror killing calls for the fervent prayers of every Christian that through the intervention of Providence, this fiendish destruction of human life can be halted and the community left to work towards the sanity of normal living.
Hello and welcome to the Irish History Boys with me, Cormac Moore.
And me, Tim McGarry. I was reading there from the Irish News of August the 1st, 1975, and a fairly hard-hitting and despairing was probably a word you could use to describe the editorial at yet another massacre in 1975, where in a period where technically there's an IRA ceasefire, but the carnage is continuing on both sides. The IRA are killing lots of people, and loyalists are killing lots of people.
Oh, yeah, and the loyalist kind of this murder triangle was really kind of taken off at that stage. You know, there was a lot of civilians being killed around this kind of Tyrone kind of Armagh kind of down area, so-called triangle. And the Glenanne gang obviously were basically working hard at that stage and spreading terror and
look, there's a lot of people who are forgotten about and stuff. The Miami's kind of remembered because there's a kind of the death of innocence sort of thing about it.
Because that's the phrase you hear all the time: the death of innocence.
Even during the height of the Troubles, people were allowed to go to dances and were allowed to go to discos and were allowed to listen
and
to
Protestants
bands
and Catholics would mingle.
Mixed. And the Miami Show Band were a fairly big show band in their day.
Do you remember? I know you would have been around 10 or so, would you?
Yeah, I would have been around 10. No, my musical tastes were a bit better than that.
Well, in fairness, like from reading up to them, like they shouldn't have been called a Miami show band by then, because they had moved away from the show band scene and they were doing their own music. Like Fran O'Toole, from what a lot of people say, would have been a massive star. You know? And there was a talks of him actually going to America, you know, leaving the Miami and actually going to America soon after to have a solo career. And Stephen Travers, who survived, and obviously it's a lot of great work in keeping their memories alive. He was actually asked by Fran, I think, to be his bass player, in America. So they had moved away. They were actually called him Miami. It should be called the Miami, not Miami Showband.
For some people who aren't familiar, the show band culture in Ireland was quite a big concept, and it was bands who they dressed the same and stuff like that, and they mainly played cover versions of songs, and they toured all
of the popular hits at the time.
And they just did their own versions, and but they were it was a massive subculture. Massive, the Miami were one of those big bands, as you say.
They were the biggest, were they?
I think they were they were certainly one of the biggest in Ireland, and they were very, very popular, and they were packed out halls all across Ireland, and they felt free and able to come up north all the time, and they played the north because during the height of the Troubles, lots of theatres have been blown up, cinemas have been blown up, but there were still dance halls where you could get a gig. And this is one of the few things, and for this to be taken away in such a horrible, brutal manner, and the for those who know, the Miami Show Band played in Banbridge. They were heading back down to Dublin. They were stopped at what they thought was a UDR checkpoint.
And they had been stopped before, and it was fine. And often they had autographs of British soldiers. Because they realised it was Miami. And they got autographs. Didn't have selfies back then, but they were regularly stopped. So that they weren't worried. If you read Stephen Travers' account of this, they weren't worried when they were stopped. But it became very, very dangerous very soon afterwards. This occasion.
And on this occasion, they were stopped not by the UDR or the police, but
it was UDR.
Slightly different issue because some of the UVF members were in the UDR, but this was a fake roadblock, and the Miami were lined up and then shot.
Well, what happened was the Harris Boyle and Wesley Somerville from the UVF, they went to plant a bomb. So they took out all the band members, have them lined up on the side of the road, and
We're putting a bomb
they
in their
were putting
bus.
a bomb on the drive, just right beside the driver's seat. The plan, as far as you know, was that they had going to time the bomb that it would go off just after they crossed the border. So
Right.
all the band would be killed, and then they would blame it. The Miami, they were actually carrying bombs and weapons for the IRA.
Right.
That was the plan. But the bomb
Detonated early.
detonated.
Killed the two UVF.
They were right beside it, so their bodies were
Yeah.
in pieces, basically.
And then
torsos,
the rest
arms
of the
everywhere,
UVF just kind of panicked and raked the.
Well, so someone said one of the band members, Des McLeod, he was thrown into the opposing field, and he actually survived with very few injuries. But the other members were thrown, like all the band members were thrown into the field by the explosion. But then the UVF just started shooting them. So Stephen Travers survived, but and they were using dum-dum bullets as well. You know, dum-dum bullets explodes in the body.
Yeah,
You know, like horrific and bullets. It went up his hip and it went right up to his left arm.
Yeah.
And all of his internal organs were like really massive internal bleeding. He almost died, but made a full recovery. But three of the members, Fran O'Toole was the lead singer, Brian McCoy and Tony Geraghty, they were shot and the way they were shot, like it was like execution. Like Fran O'Toole was shot something like 22 times in the face, you know. And he was known as a very good-looking lad.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I was going to say
it was real malicious.
It was a real shock because he was going places. He was a big star, and seeing footage of the funeral. It was a massive funeral. It was a massive shock to people all across Ireland, in the south as well.
Do you remember it all? Do you?
I remember I was only 10 at the time, 10, 11, and again. It was 1975. You know, there was another horror coming next week, and another one, and another one. But yeah, that
resonated though, didn't it?
It did resonate. Yeah. It did resonate because the plot, as it was, the UVF plot was to, blow them up on their way home, and then say they were in the IRA. Which was, But
even the UVF released a statement basically blaming them and saying they were the IRA. So it was they were. Like the way they went about it as well, and to this day, like I know Stephen Travers met some of the people, not necessarily involved, but leadership of UVF, and they weren't really apologetic at all about what happened. So
it tended not to be. And in fact, one of the murderers, Wesley Somerville, is still commemorated every year in Moygashel. There's a big march, and
and Harris Boyle too.
Harris Boyle,
So look, it was a. Like I've read Stephen Travers kind of watched and I know he's a book coming out in October as well, and the bass player, I think it's called, and watched Netflix, and like it was that Dead of Innocence, like they were like, and they were a mixed band as well. Brian McCoy, one of the people who was killed, even though he lived in Dublin, he was from the north, and his dad or granddad was in the Orange Order. He's a Protestant. There was they never and Stephen Travers, he was from Carrick-on-Suir, on the border of Tipperary, Waterford, and Kilkenny. They never asked each other what religion they were. They didn't care. Like they weren't involved in the
and there was none of that in the show band culture anyway. As you said, mixed audiences and all of that. So it was one of those ones that made this place seem utterly hopeless. I mean, strategy is the wrong word behind it, but let's take it, try and be as objective as we can. Say what was the UVF strategy here was to terrorise the terrorists in their view, that they were bringing the terror to the Catholic community, so the Catholic community would then turn on the IRA. Was that the strategy, or just revenge, or just kind of
fright, just terrified them? Terrified them like.
But to what end?
Well, who knows? It is a good question. I honestly
to what end?
Yeah, like is it like, and it wasn't even revenge killings, because. If you look at the first troubles, the 1920s, a lot of the atrocities committed against civilians were in response to what unions thought was atrocities against specials or an IRA attack, for example, and then they respond by basically killing a lot of civilians. That was happening in waves during from 1920 to 1922. But with particularly the murder triangle, then you got the Shankill butchers, like soon after, and there was no strategy at all. It was just pure hatred and sectarianism. There was no what could be achieved from it other than terrifying a whole community. There was it wasn't going to diminish the IRA. It wasn't going to in any way impact what the IRA was doing. It wasn't going to And also we know now like that there was a lot of collusion with the British as well.
The Glenanne gang.
Glenanne gang, yeah.
A
And
lot of
these
members.
are the UDR. The UDR is part of the British Army.
Yes.
You know? This is not an illegal organisation. UVF wasn't an illegal organisation at that stage either. So,
I think the UVF was, the UDA weren't.
But UVF weren't illegal for a time as well, were they not?
I think they were.
Okay, yeah.
The UDA weren't, and
UDA
in fact weren't until very, very late on.
Okay, but obviously UDR would never work because that was part of.
Well, the UDR, the Ulster Defence Regiment, is part of the British Army. But there were a lot of security force members who were part of this loyalist gang, and not just actively colluding, taking part, and passing information. Things that seems to be. I mean, it's fairly accepted now that this kind of collusion was rampant in this area. And so,
Stephen Travers, like obviously, his memory of it would have been, severely affected by the injuries he sustained. But he very specifically recalled a senior, what looked like a British Army man, taking control of the situation
with an English accent.
With an English accent,
who was in charge of the operation.
Yeah.
Who he alleges is Robert Narak.
Yeah. Who obviously we'll never hear from Robert Narak because he was killed and his body's never been recovered. No, he still is one of the disappeared.
He's one of the few that disappeared.
But he like from a lot of accounts he was involved with DVF, UDR.
Yeah.
Different and RUC were involved in some of these incidents as well. Like so there was it's a lot of unanswered questions. I know we've got a few reports coming out soon, which have been dragging on for years. Hopefully we'll get some answers, but I'm not holding out much hope though.
Well, I mean, even this week there's been more discussion about legacy and digging up the truth, and everybody's very reluctant. Nobody comes out of this very well. The paramilitaries out in the IRA are not going to give up their facts, and the British government are not going to give up their facts either. They're not going to release a report and say, "Oh yes, Robert Narak was probably there, and Robert Narak did this, and by the way, we know exactly
We're sorry.
what happened. Sorry about that." Because it's not going to happen.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's not. But it doesn't help the victims. Obviously, they want closure, and they probably will never get closure before most of the victims die. But yeah, look, it's just a very despairing moment. Obviously, people call it, the day that innocents died. And then bands stopped coming up north. From the south. Like literally immediately afterwards, there was loads of kind of venues that had gigs that were meant to be played, and no, sorry, we can't come up. And another avenue that was kind of broken by the trouble.
Which is why the Irish news editor is so despairing. I mean, it's kind of.
It does sound like it's almost kind
this is always going to go on.
Hopeless.
We need people every citizen encourage every citizen to stand firm and reassert with courage that they want peace. Funny enough, the peace people started the next year in 1976 started, so there was that feeling of kind of this can't go on, but there was nobody doing anything really to stop it. We had the convention running at the same time. The IRA technically on a ceasefire, but it's more observed in the breach than in the observation of it. And it just seems one of those periods where it kind of go, this is just going to go on and get worse. In fact, and early '76 it does, in that area,
I know, but obviously, but in '98, it's pretty much. Goes on for another 2 decades. But who would have thought back then? So obviously, start in '69, you could say, and mid '70s, this is going to go on forever. I still think most of us didn't think it would go on for another 20 years. I still think maybe it might go on until the start of the '80s.
Most people who start wars don't know when it's going to end or how it's going to end.
Yeah, but I think the worst pessimists would not have considered it would have gone on for more than 20 years later. So it's but it was a very, very bleak time, of course. And it was
very bleak.
Just an awful, like, murder and killing, the way they were... and the way they were butchered as well. Like, it was a real execution type job. And it was real like, well, none of these are going to survive, And will do as much damage to their bodies as well in the process.
Yeah, and the Irish news is saying there appears to be no prospect of peace coming. And if people don't stand up and do something, we're hastening the breakdown of the whole social fabric. I think the Miami also contributed to southern views of the north, and they go, keep away from this. Here's a very big star, Fran O'Toole. Big funerals in Dublin. I remember him quite well. I think Father Brian Darcy officiated it.
Did he? Yeah.
I think young Father Brian Darcy. And it probably contributed to people down in the south going, "Oh, just keep away from there. Close that door. Don't go near the north. Why would you bother? Just."
But you could understand why. Because,
of course.
Obviously before that, again, I go back to Stephen Travers' account, and he's done so much to keep the memory of the 3 band members who were killed alive. He's gonna. It never crossed their mind before what happened to them.
That this could
not
happen.
across the border,
Yeah.
There was no incidents. It was always mixed. They were always well received by Protestants and Catholics, and then obviously everything changed, and so I know my dad, and he never went north.
Yeah.
He never once set foot in the north.
Your dad never set foot in the
Never
north?
set foot in the north. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he refused.
His
to do so.
entire life?
His entire life.
Really?
So, yeah. So it was well before the Miami,
Right.
massacre, but that's
Was
a lot.
that a protest against the 6-county statelet, or was that
I
fear, or was that...
I would have thought it was a protest against the partition.
Right.
He didn't want to see a British soldier. Yeah, but that was a common view by a lot of people.
Yeah.
That,
I think it's still quite... A lot of people down south haven't been up north.
Yeah.
It's still the case.
Yeah, it is. Joe, I can't understand. I live, just south of Dublin.
Right.
And loads of people from south, say Dublin, will go to Donegal for weekend away or a holiday, and it takes at least 4 hours. So.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to put people off going to Donegal. I love Donegal; it's a great county. But they never go to Down, for example, the Moor Mountains, which absolutely stunning county, and it's only an hour and 10 minutes or so to get to
Rostrevor,
Warren Point,
Newcastle.
Newcastle not far off from there. And a beautiful, absolutely stunning county, and you will find very few people who've ever gone to Down, for a holiday. But we'll go 4 hours to Donegal, no problem at all.
Yeah.
Donegal is a beautiful county, very unique county, but Down has some beautiful.
Fermanagh, Fermanagh, beautiful.
Fermanagh as well, yeah,
beautiful county.
We're
doing work for the tourist board here, Cormac.
Of Northern Ireland, yeah.
The Northern Ireland Tourist Board. Southerners, come north. We're all right. We even like Cormac. Sure, we give him a podcast and everything.
but yeah, there is this. There is this thing that's different.
There's still a hangover. People down south go to the dark north, and it's and the sectarian.
This othering of the north,
Yes.
The black north, as it would have been called back in the start of the 20th century.
Exactly.
It was Tim Healy who became the first Governor General of the Free State. He was notorious beforehand for hastening the downfall of Parnell.
Right.
He said he went up to Belfast one day, the worst 24 hours of his life. He'll never go there again.
Well, it was Reginald Maudling, the British Secretary of State, who famously...
Awful country.
We have a bloody awful country. Give me a large whiskey. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Irish History Boys with me, Tim McGarry, and Cormac Moore. You can get in touch with us at any time you want on WhatsApp or email. If you have any questions, send us a voice note to 07483 313 842 or drop us an email on irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. Hello everybody, just a quick reminder that the Irish History Boys are going live. Yes, your chance to see me and Cormac Moore in the flesh. We'll be at St Mary's University on Wednesday the 6th of August for a special show as part of Fela and Fubble. It'll be full of history, crack and stories with a live audience. The crack will come from me, not from Cormac obviously. Tickets are in the link below. Grab yours now, don't want to miss this.
Take a question, will we?
Yeah, let's take a question. We've been getting nice. You are very welcome, ladies and gentlemen. If you ask a question, we will do our best to answer it. Even the hard ones. Have you got a hard one for me?
Yeah, for you.
For me?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Martin Butcher, hi Tim and Cormac.
Oh, he got that right, you see, because somebody else wrote Cormac and Tim. It is Tim and Cormac, isn't it?
I would say Cormac and Tim.
Yeah, we're deputy and first minister and deputy first minister. We're co-equals, but I'm first.
But who is first minister?
But I'm first. We're co-equals.
I'll have to have a word with Jim about this. Everyone talks about Edward Carson and Ian Paisley Senior as the two big fathers of Unionists in Northern Ireland, but you have history forgotten in between them that kept the ship sailing. Who was the unsung hero for Unionists?
All right,
And then also for the Republicans, everyone knows Eamon de Valera and Michael Collins, but who else was involved with Sinn Féin and in the 1920s and were in the first government that people might not know about?
Right.
How long were they in the Dáil for, and what was their jobs?
Right.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Martin. Good question. Do you want to tackle the unions first?
Well, obviously James Craig, you can't forget him.
Yeah, well, Edward Carson and Ian Paisley, still the two big figures of unions, Ulster unionism.
Well, is Ian Paisley as big as James Craig?
Well, he was during the trouble. I think he's largely... it's interesting now. I mean, obviously, when I was growing up, he was a massive figure. And
he was a protest figure.
In our early comedy career, Ian Paisley was a figure of fun, and he was a massive figure But he's kind of forgotten about these days. He's very rarely mentioned. His influence now is kind of gone. Even his church is dwindling. His party is kind of dwindling as well.
His party?
His party is... The DUP aren't as strong as they were when Paisley was in charge.
Well, for the latter part of his tenure,
and he was a massive figure, but his legacy hasn't been great. He hasn't left much behind.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, but obviously I think people who hated him for most of his career warmed a bit towards him, when he was part of the Chuckle Brothers with Mark McInnes, but obviously within his own party he was abandoned ultimately because of coalescing with Sinn Féin,
but to answer Martin's question,
look, Craig obviously is
James
as important as anyone within
James. A lot of people forget that Carson was a Dubliner who wasn't an Ulster man at all. Very rarely visited Ulster, but Craig was the main man behind the scenes.
So he was the organizer. Carson was the mouth,
the eloquent
orator,
speechmaker and the orator, and he was the political front of it. Well, Craig was very powerful politically as well, but Craig was the man behind the scenes doing all the hard work, wasn't he?
Yeah. But you could have other figures there as well, like Richard Dawson Bates, big hate figure within the nationalist community, but he was very influential as an Ulster Unionist. He was secretary of the Ulster Unionist Council. He became the Home Affairs Minister. When Northern Ireland was created, he's there for decades. Basil Brooke, obviously, subsequently, became a hugely important figure. And I actually, a person who's often never mentioned, and you may not even know his name, Ernest Clark, was a hugely important figure.
I don't know Ernest Clark.
He was the person who set up the civil service of Northern Ireland.
I have heard this. Yes.
It was actually Queen's BBC Royal Irish Academy did this the centenary kind
podcast.
Podcast.
Yes.
My talk was on Ernest Clark.
Oh, right.
And that's and they're all online. There's some really good contributions.
And what was he? He was.
So he was English. He was English, and so he was brought in. This is before Northern Ireland was created.
Government of Ireland Act comes in, and
but the Government of Ireland hadn't come in.
Right, it was coming in.
It was coming in. So the bill was going through Parliament, and Craig wanted didn't want someone from Dublin Castle because the unions believed they were all basically anti-partition. They wanted Dominion home rule for the whole island, so they wanted their own man. So the British government appointed Ernest Clark as Under Secretary for Belfast and just for the area that would become the 6 counties. And so he comes to Belfast armed only with a table and a chair, and then soon with an Act of Parliament, as he said, and he set up the whole machinery of Northern Ireland. Because you have to remember, even though the whole of Ireland was part of the Union of the United Kingdom. It was kind of governed separately from the rest of the UK. You had your Chief Secretary, Lord Lieutenant, and everything was governed from Dublin. So you had all these departments, Department of the National Board of Education, you had the Department of Agriculture and Technical Instruction, and everything was run from Dublin.
Right.
So then you create this whole new entity that has no buildings, no machinery, and basically you have to create it from scratch. And that's what he did. And he did a incredible logistic administration jobs, like working 16, 70 hours. There was only about 20 people on his staff, and he had to create the whole structures for Northern Ireland to be set up by May 1921. And then he remained the head of the Northern Ireland Civil Service until 100 years ago, this year, 925. He becomes governor of Tasmania in Australia ultimately, but a very influential figure. Ernest Clark in creating the structures of this whole new polity of Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and he doesn't even get a statue outside Stormont.
He doesn't even get a statue outside
Stormont. He deserves a statue, doesn't he?
Probably more than Carson.
Oh no, Carson was fairly influential now, let's be honest.
Oh, he was, of course. I find Carson fascinating.
Carson is a fascinating guy. Really fascinating. Again, his legal career before even getting involved in Ulster politics.
Just a fascinating man, full stop. He really is.
The trial of Oscar Wilde that he ruined Oscar Wilde, and his political. And what I like about him as well, there's this little quirk. He was a total hypochondriac.
Oh, total hypochondriac.
The people don't. I mean, he's a brilliant barrister, brilliant orator, but he spends his time writing to. Is it Lily Londonderry? Is it one of his kind of? I go, oh my bad back. Oh no, you want to hear? Oh my hand's not well. I'm really tired
he lived.
Today.
He died in 35, isn't it? And he's born in 1856. So he's nearly 80.
No, 1854. Same.
54. So 81. He is. He's 81. Yeah. Same as Oscar Wilde.
Same as Oscar Wilde. And he gets into his 80s despite his
exactly. And his first wife dies, and he marries a much younger woman, Ruby. Later, but he's a total hypochondriac. All of his correspondence reflects that.
But a major figure. Well, what other Unionist figures can we think of? I mean, you think of James Mullen, David Trimble, of course. David Trimble,
Yeah, laterally, yeah.
Particularly did the deal in 1998, which the deal.
Terence O'Neill is a...
Terence O'Neill, yeah. Terence
O'Neill is a big figure as well.
The man who tried to sort of reform the Northern Ireland before.
A little bit, he tried to reform it. That wasn't even considered.
But it wasn't, well, his attitude was somewhat patronising, shall we say.
Yeah.
If you listen to the
listen to his
speeches. Yeah, listen to his accent. And he wasn't a Craigite sort of stalwart. Well, he was a stalwart unionist, but he wasn't, wouldn't have gone down well in the shipyards. Captain Terence O'Neill.
No, I don't think so. He wouldn't have been, with the lads.
Yeah, no, he wouldn't have been in the Linfield Social Club having a pint.
Sandy Row, yeah, he just wouldn't. But look, there is a lot of influential figures, but the two big beasts of Ulster Unionist politics when partition happened certainly were Carson and Craig. And they both worked very well together because they were both quite different. One was the organiser, the man who did the nuts and bolts.
And Craig survived to the war, didn't he?
What's that?
Craig survived till... When did Craig?
Oh no, he died in 1940, but he was
1940.
But he was younger than Carson though. Who died. He was 70 or 71 or something.
Well, he was Prime Minister the whole time, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was Prime Minister for
20 years.
They've only had 6 Prime Ministers.
Yeah.
It was and John M. Andrews was very important as well, who took over from Carson. He was Minister for Craig, sorry. He was Minister for Labour for pretty much up until 40 when he becomes. He's not a very successful Prime Minister. He lasts for a few years, taking over Basil Brooke, but he kind of gets the whole labour movement on side, So the Ulster Unionist Labour Association. So that group basically, he which was really important here. All of the cabinet, all of the government are from the ascendancy. They're upper class Protestant society in Ulster. But they're still able to get the working class on board. And because they forget about bread and butter issues, and it's all about the constitutional question.
Well,
always,
this is an odd comparison, but the Orange Order and the GAA are kind of similar in that they're classless organisations. The Orange Order will have the big landowner and the shipyard worker and the middle class guy, and they're all in the similar way the GAA does. And that they were able to cohere. I mean, no matter what you say about unionist politics and the fight against Home Rule. Absolutely, the vast majority of Protestants were involved in the same campaign. Everywhere there were farmers in Fermanagh or shipyard workers or whatever,
But John M. Andrews was key in getting that happen. He was very important for the whole labour movement coalescing. The working, not necessarily the labour movement were generally anti-partition, but the labourers themselves, the working class, were anti-home rule, and it was because of people like Carson as well, but also John M. Andrews very important there. So the second part, I suppose, we go to.
No, we should do a separate show on our top 10 unionists.
Yeah.
Your favourite unionists? We should do.
We have to get someone to help us with that. But then the other part of Martin's question about
Collins and De Valera.
Obviously, Collins and De Valera are big, but Arthur Griffith, you can't really look beyond Arthur Griffith. He was the founder of Sinn Féin. He gave up the presidency of Sinn Féin when Sinn Féin becomes his umbrella, becomes his main Republican movement, and De Valera takes over. But he still is a key figure.
The brains behind it, isn't he?
De Valera was the brains too. De Valera was very intellectual. He would have very bright guy. Like De Valera is often misunderstood, but he was ahead of his time in a lot of ways. But Griffith was a thinker as well, and had a lot of different thoughts about what solution Ireland should have. He famously had the Hungary insurrection, or insurrection of Hungary in the early 1900s. He was suggesting kind of a similar solution where the Austro-Hungarian Empire was kind of co-equals almost. So he was suggesting the same kind of solution for Ireland, and Britain. But then he obviously becomes part of the Republican movement. He's not a Republican himself, and he's the main signatory of the treaty, not Collins. He's the leader of that negotiating team, and he's probably the only one of the signatories that actually really likes the treaty. He thinks it's a good solution, and he thinks the boundary commission will lead to huge parts of the north being transferred to south. So he's a very important figure.
He dies in 22.
So he dies
a couple of days before.
10 days before Collins. You see Collins at the funeral.
Yeah.
And then he's,
Collins is interesting. We did a documentary on the long and the short of it.
Yeah, I remember that one. You and David sitting at Bale na Blá.
David Hume to Bale na Blá. But the interesting thing about Collins is a couple of things that people kind of assume about the image of Collins is that he didn't actually fire a shot in anger.
In 1916 he probably did.
Well, he was in the GPO in 1916 and he stupidly fired a few shots at Bill na Blah. But
with a few points
with a few pints on him. But I think of what came across in some of the research I've been doing about Collins is that a lot of other Republicans were jealous of him, and he had a big public image. When he went to London, they were in the press with her and going, "This is the leader of the murder gang" and all of that. But he had this
and the Scarlet Pimpernel,
stuff, which is slightly all blown out of proportion. But there were other Republicans
going, press blow things out of proportion.
I know.
Well, I never.
Shocking. But he and there was a lot of jealousy of
well, but some people, but that's overhyped as well. That's a bit, like say Cottle Brewer, like there's always this story that Cottle Brewer and Collins did not. They actually did hate each other,
right.
But it's blown out of all proportion with the movie, and even RTE did a piece. It was kind of 100th anniversary of that infamous meeting of the Dáil on 7th of January 1922,
right.
When they vote 63 votes to 57 for the treaty.
Yeah.
But they're reenacting it in RTE. And it's this actor playing Cottle Brewer, and Cottle Brewer comes across this maniac, like frothing at the mouth. And he was anti-but, like he was a very considered politician. You know, he was not as radical as a lot of people make it out to be. Yes, he did not get on well with Collins, but you know, he was a very well respected, you know, a very important figure.
Yeah.
But he's treated as this comical figure who just was anti-Collins.
Yeah.
You know? That wasn't the case. Yeah, Collins there was of course some. And people resented his power, but he was never head of the army. Like, you know, he was until
well, he was running the finance department
until the provisional government.
Yeah,
he becomes the head of the army and the government.
But he was
so he could have been dictator. A lot of people claim, you know. But before that, he was head of the intelligence and minister of finance. You know,
right.
And obviously both very important roles. And he was a massive.
So who else is forgotten about in that pantheon?
Well, obviously we can't forget Cosgrave takes over both Griffiths. Griffith was president of the Dáil. Collins was president or the chairperson of the provisional government. W.T. Cosgrave becomes the first leader of the official Free State, and Kevin O'Higgins, fellow Leishman, he's probably a more important figure in many respects. He's apparently the man who's really controlling the government. He's the brains more so than Cosgrave, and he's a very important figure. He's involved in everything that Free State government does.
Right.
Infamously, you know, he was Minister of Justice when the four men were executed. In December the 8th, 1922.
Including my great auntie's fiance,
Joe McKelvey, of course, yeah. But Rory O'Connor was Kevin O'Higgins' best man at his wedding. Only just over a year beforehand, October 21.
Yeah.
But he's a very hardline figure. But he's involved in the Boundary Commission negotiations. He's involved in all of the major government decisions. He's the main. He's the person that puts down the mutiny and gets rid of his rival Richard Mulcahy, and then he gets assassinated in
1927.
Yeah, but he's a very important figure in the early days. So, like, obviously Sean Lemass is a hugely important figure as well. He's founder of Fianna Fáil. You know, he's Minister of Industry and Commerce. You know, so he's very involved in the economic policy of the state. Becomes a very, you know, considered the best Taoiseach of Ireland by most people.
Sean
Lemass. And he changed the policy, which actually this moves on nicely to our next conversation, because Sean Lemass changes the whole policy of Southern government in many respects and how you approach partition.
This is August the 2nd, 1975. Irish people have said no to force. Mr. Liam Cosgrave made full use of the theme of the Helsinki Conference, Security and Cooperation in Europe, to give international airing to the stand of successive Irish governments, freely elected over the decades by the Irish people in respect of that section of the island which is part of the United Kingdom. And he said, "There's no question of the majority of people living on this island attempting to use any kind of coercion on the minority who wish to remain members of the United Kingdom to bring the two parts of the island together." So this is kind of interesting because we have the IRA camp, we've just talked about the Miami and all that. The violence is really, really rife in the north. The south are saying, well, you know, the Unionist fear is we're going to be dragged into United Ireland against our will, either by the IRA and the southern government are planning and want to do that to us, and they'll want to, they'll drive their southern tanks up from Dublin and, and plant them in the grounds of Stormont.
Do you think many unions really thought that today?
Well, there certainly was a fear in 1969 when the troubles
there was,
broke
there was,
out.
and obviously the arms crisis in 1970. You know, there was this.
But I mean, even a cursory glance would tell you that the Irish government were never going to invade the north. They didn't have an army, and they wouldn't want. Now, politically,
it would have been, and some people to this day are disgusted that Jack Lynch didn't do that. But really, why would he have done that? It would have been a disaster. You know? The British government would have. untold damage to Ireland.
Well, the Republican view would be that the South are very good at talking up. We smash partition and we're against partition, and did feck all. But the other side of it is this side of it. The Unionists go, the Southern government are out to get us, and they want us into their evil United Ireland, and they're plotting against us the entire time. And they're colluding with the IRA and stuff. But this is the Irish government setting out its policy and say, look, for the past 50 years from 25, we were never going to use force ever.
Well, even, I think David de Valera
against partition. Sorry,
Eamon de Valera said it during the just before the treaty negotiations started. So after the truce in July 21, he goes over to meet Lloyd George in Downing Street for 4 meetings. They don't get anywhere, and then there's kind of megaphone diplomacy for a couple of months before the actual treaty negotiations begin in October 21. But de Valera in the Dáil at the time says, we're ruling out coercion. That's not going. We do not want to coerce the North. It's not going to work. We don't believe in it. These are Irish citizens. This is what the British have been doing to us. So why would we do that to our fellow Irish citizens, even though they don't want to be part of Ireland? But so they kind of ruled it out at that stage. Now Collins was kind of toying with it, coercion. 1922, but he was all over the shop when it came to the North. He was 1 minute he was talking to Craig and Green and peace pacts and all that. On the other hand, he was arming the IRA the Mayo offensive. He was the one pointed out initially and didn't help it at all and didn't do anything with it. So Collins was a bit all over the shop. What's that?
Ordered the shooting of Henry Wilson.
He could have, there's a good chance he probably did, but it's not conclusive at this stage. Collins was all over the shop a bit. Who knows what would have happened if he'd survived? But once he died, and even before he died, the Free State government, the provision government, were saying
they were never going to go back.
We're not going to do coercion. We're not going to do obstruction. We're not going to do kind of boycotting of things. It's not working. But then even after the Boundary Commission, you had Cosgrave saying at the time the Boundary Commission were going to talk to the Ulster Unionists. We're going to have a peaceful co-living arrangement almost, that anytime there's an issue of common interest that we'll meet up about. But they don't meet again. They never meet. And all you hear from the South, and it's often from pressure internally from the South, but all it is this kind of bombastic language about the evils of partition. Zero practical policy, zero strategy.
Nothing.
How to end it. Nothing. Like loads of protests and even going abroad and talking about the evils of partition, but no real engagement with the people in the North, but even the British governments. And that all changes.
Your dad wouldn't even come up north.
What's that?
Your dad wouldn't even come up north.
Exactly. Well, he wasn't in the government now.
I know he wasn't in the government.
He was a farmer.
But the point is that there was a protectionist mindset, and both states go, well, it's up there and it's down. Well, yes, partition, boo, but they weren't going to do anything about it.
There's definitely an element of that. But that changes with Lamass, though.
Yeah.
That changes with Lamass. And the whole Irish government policy changes. And this is not just Fianna Fáil, it's Fine Gael and Labour as well.
So when did Sean Lamass become Taoiseach?
So he becomes in 59, and he's Taoiseach until 66. And he obviously has the very famous meeting with two meetings, Terence O'Neill in early 65. But he, on the ground, he had
Ian Paisley threw snowballs.
Ken Whitaker, the famous civil servant in the South, who many consider instrumental in modernising Ireland, getting its economy in a kind of a more international footing. He was from the North. I think he's from County Down, Ken Whitaker, but he believed there should be a complete change of policy in the North, and was accepting partition as it stood. It was there, whether you liked it or not. But let's try and pragmatically engage with partition, like try and get North-South bodies that they had jettisoned in the 20s. Try and actually talk to unions, try and talk to other parties in the North. So by the 70s, during the Troubles, you have Sunningdale, which has the kind of Irish government policy all over this North-South strand. Becomes really part of the talk from then on. Really, that there has to be a North-South strand. There has to be kind of not necessarily kind of have executive powers, Southern government, but at least have a say in Northern Ireland. And it has its flaws, and absolutely you can see why people would be disgruntled with parts of it. But it's more pragmatic. It's got a better chance than just talking about the evils of partition and we're going to end partition and not do anything about it. So that's where. And Cosgrave saying, look, coercion is out. And
he's also making the point that violence doesn't help as well, and the violence that's happening in the north is counterproductive. And whatever you say about the IRA, take the morality out of it. It was entirely counterproductive. It was never going to bring the United out. In fact, it probably put it back by 30, 40 years.
Do you think so?
It may be a controversial point of view,
yeah,
but maybe it shouldn't be.
I don't know.
Genuine,
I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I
genuinely
don't
think
know.
violence. Yeah, I think violence just entrenches bitterness and makes people.
Look,
more
violence
hard-line.
generally should be a very, very last resort, but it often has to be done. Say, look at World War II, you needed violence.
Yeah.
Would you blame Ukrainians for fighting for their?
Yeah, but that's a bit different from the troubles in Northern Ireland.
But is it though?
Yeah,
But is it from 69? So 69.
Well, there's an argument to say yes, violence was inevitable in 69, 70, but the IRA campaign was not supported by the vast majority of nationalists, and was a campaign.
Either was the Easter Rising.
No, yeah, exactly.
But then it was.
Well, no, it was subsequently supported by
very quickly.
Very quickly. But here, the IRA campaign from 69 to 94, effectively, that was a minority campaign.
It was a minority campaign.
It was a minority campaign, but they said, we've the right to shoot people for Ireland. And what were they trying to achieve? They were trying to
unite Ireland.
But by shooting people, how does that drive the Brits out? How does that make Unionists go, I must join the United?
They would have argued that obviously that say attacking place in Britain as well.
Yeah.
That made people in Britain notice and go, "What are we doing in this country in the first place? Why don't we get out of here?"
Yeah.
Could that be, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah.
Could that be argued?
No,
by attacking the British mainland, would they actually, making the British government and the British people kind of go, "What are we doing in the north anyway? Why do we want the north?" We saw recently, who was it said, Richard Madeley to Mary Lou McDonald on TV that north is a basket case.
Yeah.
Why would you want it?
Yes, but
the IRA campaign in Britain contributes towards this kind of the British wanting to jettison, British people jettison.
I'm not so sure. If you read any history of British politics,
Yeah.
Ireland is only when violence happens. Yes, they get upset about it, but it's at the bottom of any priority list of any British government ever.
Yeah. Of course, I agree with that. yeah.
Ireland is, and trying to blow that, and if they do look at it, they go, right, what happens here? You're going to tell a million prods they go down south and join the United Ireland? No, it's not going to happen. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's a fair point. But the Irish government had come to the realization that just talking about evil is partition, and you have to agree with them. I think it was obviously a very long-term game. Didn't bear fruit for a very, very long time. But it definitely was more effective policy than just going, or sending an army up, which there was no real army to send up anyway. So it was never going to happen. That was to me. I've always considered that implausible that there could have been a military resolution to the troubles from an Irish government point of view.
It wasn't. And he was called explicitly and. Rejecting it and all, but trying to bust the myth as well that the Irish government. There's a nice quote here that the Irish government, some people said, devoted itself with sleepless cunning to planning for the conquest of the northeastern corner of the island. Ruthless cunning, sleepless cunning. Sorry, and that wasn't.
But that is the ulster unionist side has always been this kind of siege mentality. They kind of thrive off of that. It's those Southerners. They're out to get us, they're out to and wrap us in a tricolour, and that's what their zero-sum game is, and you still have that. You still have that with Brexit, that it was all a con job, It was not Britain's fault at all.
Yeah.
Brexit. It was all to do with Europe and Ireland playing their games, and you still hear it, like no one actually taking responsibility for their own actions, and blaming the other, blaming them across the border in this case. So,
See, you're straying away from history and into politics, my friend.
But aren't they always intermixed?
But there are intermixed, and Brexit we will be discussing, and so we'll always be discussing Brexit for the rest of time.
Until the next Brexit vote.
To go back in.
To go back in. You think Keir Starmer?
Sorry about that. Sorry for the mess.
Whoops. Should we just call it whoops?
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Irish History Boys podcast with me, Tim McGarry, and Dr. Cormac Moore. And you get in touch with us us anytime on WhatsApp or email. If you have any questions, leave a voice note on 07483 313 842 or drop us an email on irishhistoryboys@gmail.com. Do we have time for a last question, or do you want to?
No,
enough?
yeah, we're good now. Yeah,
We're good now.
We're good now.
Cormac Moore's had enough, ladies and gentlemen. I want to give you more history. Cormac Moore's going, no, I fulfilled my contractual obligation. It's time for me to go home. Cormac, always a pleasure.
On that note,
On that, Bob,
see you next time.
We'll see you next time.